Defining the concept of negotiation is not an easy task. Several definitions have been proposed in the literature, each of them offering its own nuance. From the definitions I have proposed, we can draw certain characteristics that allow us, if not to define precisely what negotiation is, at least to highlight its most essential aspects. We will underline 8 important characteristics. Negotiation occurs between 2 or more parties who are interdependent and who perceive a divergence of interest and seek to resolve it. Negotiation takes the form of a discussion which ultimately aims at collective decision on the perceived divergence. Entering into negotiation is a voluntary process that occurs among parties who see discussion as a more favorable option than open conflict, domination, or the use of established rules. Let us take this characteristic one by one. First, negotiation occurs between 2 or more parties. One does not negotiate alone. It always takes at least 2 parties to negotiate. The term parties is deliberately used here to reflect the fact that negotiation can take place either between individuals, in which case it is referred to as interpersonal negotiations, or between groups, when it is referred to as intergroup negotiations. Sometimes, groups will delegate negotiations to individuals who represent them. These are called representative negotiations. The parties must be interdependent. This means, as Lee Thompson points out in his definition, that the parties are not able to achieve their goals on their own. They need each other to achieve their goals. This does not mean that the parties have equal status. In an organization, for example, employees and managers are interdependent. They need each other to make the business work. However, managers and employees have different status in the organization, and they do not have the same decision-making power. These interdependent parties must perceive a divergence of interest between them. There are 2 elements here. First, the divergence may concern a multitude of things, such as the distribution of resources, or the interpretation of reality, or their opinion, or the value they pursue. Second, this divergence must be perceived. We are therefore in the subjective domain, in the domain of perception. Indeed, it is actually possible that the parties perceive a divergence when this divergence is objectively non-existent. Or conversely, the parties may not perceive a divergence which is nevertheless very real. As long as the divergence is not perceived by the parties, it will not give rise to a discussion, a negotiation. This negotiation is a discussion ostensibly aimed at resolving the divergence. There are other ways of managing differences. Negotiation differs from other modes of divergence in that it uses discussion to avoid resorting to actions that might hurt or destroy the relationship. Yet, while discussion is more appropriate than open conflict to preserve relationship, this does not mean that relationships will never deteriorate as a result of discussion. The discussion is ultimately about collective decision-making on the topic of perceived divergence. This collective decision-making implies that the parties decide together what to do about the divergence, and they implicitly agree to adjust to each other. A discussion in which one of the parties maintains its initial position at all costs cannot be described as a negotiation. It is more in the realm of domination. To ensure mutual adjustment of the parties, it is essential that negotiation process is voluntary. You cannot force someone to talk. You may be able to force them to sit down in a room with the other party, but if they don't want to talk, they won't talk. Or they will only speak one-sidedly, repeating over and over again the position they are defending, without ever deviating from it. Finally, what will determine whether individuals enter into this voluntary process is their conviction that by discussing, they are likely to obtain more or something better than by not negotiating or by resorting to other conflict management methods. If, for example, I'm convinced in the case of a divorce that the decisions made by an external judge will be more favorable to me than a discussion with my ex-spouse, I will be more likely to take our divergence to the court than to enter in a negotiation or in a mediation. On a similar note, many wars are based on the conviction that only an open and armed fight might allow one's country to achieve its goals.